In 1901, a sponge diver working the waters off the Greek island of Antikythera made a discovery that would shatter everything we thought we knew about the ancient world.
He pulled from the seafloor what appeared to be nothing more than a corroded greenish lump of bronze and rock.
It looked like trash. It looked like debris. For 2 years, it sat ignored in a museum basement in Athens, dismissed as a curiosity.
Then a curious archaeologist named Valeris Stais decided to take a closer look. He picked up what everyone thought was worthless and held it up to the light. What he found underneath made his hands shake. This was not junk. This was a machine. And it was unlike anything the ancient world was supposed to have built.
The object is now known as the Antikythera Mechanism, and when researchers finally got a proper look inside, they discovered it contained at least 37 individual bronze gears.
37 gears, precision engineered, copper aged and corroded after 2,000 years on the ocean floor. It would take another 1,400 years before European craftsmen in the 14th century built clockwork mechanisms that approached this level of complexity.
Let me show you what we are dealing with here. The mechanism was recovered in 82 separate fragments.
The largest pieces are labeled simply A through G. When researchers scanned these fragments with modern computed tomography, they found something extraordinary. The surfaces of the bronze plates were covered in inscriptions, not vague scratch marks or decorative engravings. Instructions. A user's manual.
Instructions for a device that tracked the sun, the moon, and the 5 known planets. You crank a handle on one side, and the gears inside turn in precise ratios.
Technical precision, listing items. To display the positions of the Sun, the Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn against the backdrop of the zodiac.
It predicts lunar and solar eclipses with mathematical certainty, accounting for the Saros cycle, the 18-year period when eclipses repeat.
It adjusts for the moon's elliptical orbit using a pin-and-slot mechanism that we did not think existed until centuries later.
This was not a toy. This was not a curiosity. This was a fully functional astronomical computer built before the birth of Christ by people whose names we have largely forgotten.
So who built it? Where did this knowledge come from? And more importantly, why did it disappear? The forensic evidence points us in one direction. The latitude marked on one of the mechanism's spirals corresponds to approximately 35 degrees north.
That is the latitude of Rhodes, a small Greek island in the eastern Aegean that was home to one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, the Colossus, and also home to one of the greatest astronomers humanity had ever produced. His name was Hipparchus. Hipparchus mapped the stars, calculated the length of the solar year with remarkable accuracy, and developed the theory of epicycles to explain planetary motion.
Some researchers have suggested the device may have been a collaboration, perhaps a secret project built in the shadow of Archimedes' famous workshop in Syracuse.
Archimedes reportedly built planetariums and mechanical devices that wowed Roman visitors. He died in 212 BCE when Roman soldiers sacked Syracuse. He is widely considered the father of scientific astronomy. If any single person in the ancient world had the mathematical knowledge to design a mechanism like this, it was him. Some of his work was captured as spoils of war. Pliny the Elder wrote about bronze mechanisms that simulated celestial motion.
But the Antikythera Mechanism predates even Archimedes at around 100 BCE. It sits in an uncomfortable gap between the great engineering traditions of the Hellenistic world and the Roman conquest that followed.
But here is where the story takes a darker turn. Here is where the cold case becomes something more than a puzzle of gears and mathematics.
Why would anyone build a machine to predict the future? In the ancient world, eclipses were not simply astronomical events. They were omens. They were signs from the gods. A solar eclipse arriving on the wrong day could destabilize a kingdom, spark a war, or bring down a ruler deemed unworthy by the heavens.
If you could predict an eclipse before it happened, you possessed something far more valuable than scientific knowledge. You possessed power.
You possessed the ability to shape the narrative of what was happening in the sky and what it meant for those watching from below. Was the Antikythera Mechanism a genuine scientific breakthrough, or was it a state-sponsored weapon of political control?
We may never know the answer with certainty, but the fact that such a device existed at all suggests that the ancient world was not as ignorant as we sometimes assume.
The people who built this were not simple villagers or superstitious priests. They were engineers. They were mathematicians.
They were people who understood the heavens well enough to build a machine that tracked them with precision we still marvel at today.
The ship that carried the mechanism went down somewhere between 60 and 70 meters below the surface of the Mediterranean.
It was a Roman vessel, likely heading toward Rome with a cargo of stolen treasures, Greek statues, bronze vessels, and luxury goods being transported back to the empire as symbols of conquest and wealth.
The mechanism was not junk being discarded. It was a treasure being moved, a stolen prize. And when that ship sank, something else went down with it. Not just the bronze and the gears, but the knowledge of how to build them.
The tradition of precision engineering in the Hellenistic world declined after the Roman conquest. The great workshops of Rhodes and Alexandria were gradually abandoned. The libraries were burned or scattered.
And somewhere in that collapse, the secret of the Antikythera mechanism was lost. It took the human race approximately 1,500 years to rediscover this level of mechanical sophistication. We built better clocks in the Renaissance. We built computing machines in the 19th century. But the direct lineage, the thread of knowledge that should have connected the ancient world to our own, was severed.
We often tell ourselves the story of history as a straight line climbing upward. Ancient Greece was primitive, medieval Europe was dark, the Renaissance brought the light, progress, improvement, forward motion.
But the Antikythera mechanism is a problem for that story. It is evidence that the line does not always go up. Sometimes it goes sideways. Sometimes it drops.
Sometimes an entire civilization reaches a peak of knowledge and then watches that knowledge crumble into the sea, only to start climbing again from a lower elevation as if the climb never happened before.
Innovation is not a guarantee. It is fragile. It can be lost, it can be buried, it can be stolen and sunk and forgotten for millennia only to be found again by accident in a museum basement by a man who did not know what he was holding.
So what does this tell us about the human story? It tells us that the people who built the world's first computer were not very different from us.
They were curious. They were clever. They were ambitious. They wanted to understand the cosmos and perhaps control it too.
They built a machine to see the future, and then the future buried that machine under 60 meters of water where it stayed for 2,000 years until we were ready to look again.
History is not a museum exhibit with everything labeled and preserved. History is a crime scene with missing evidence and witnesses who died a long time ago.
And sometimes the most important clues are just sitting in a basement, waiting for someone to take a closer look.
This was the first case at Chronos Forensics.
Every artifact tells a story, and every story has a secret waiting to be uncovered. If you want to help me piece together the next one, hit subscribe and join the investigation.